Hey guys, what's up? Shiny Forehead here. And today I want to talk about not only adding Cyclops to the Tier 3 character guide because all of the information is now inputted, and might I remind you that this information now also includes the Tier 3 stat totals, which is a pretty interesting stat for those stat geeks out there, in addition to a bunch of other important information, in addition to, very recently, thanks to Jay who hit me up on Twitter, the CCF cost. So you can see that to date, if someone had gotten every single character, and if you have an account or if you see someone or a friend that has every single character tier 3, they would have had to spend a whopping, you guys can't see the amount on the screen, a whopping 17,600 CCF. That is almost 18 grand worth of CCF. I don't know how much money that would be, but there's certainly no way that you could farm up that much in, what is it, a year and 4 months, so like, 16 weeks, 16 months. It's just impossible. So yeah, a lot of CCF, Cyclops tier 3, and then the wider question that I want to discuss a little bit later about where we're sort of getting to as we creep up to 20 total tier 3s. So first of all, I want to talk about where I think Cyclops lands in terms of my lists. Now I have, I love my lists here, boys. We have 5 different rankings, and this, I think, is really what the rest of the video is going to boil down to. Not only in terms of talking about where this character is ranked, and obviously I also have Namor bolded, and I have Namor bolded because I'm expecting him to get the uniform. I'm expecting him to become Phoenix 5. I'm expecting him to become a villain. But also because this really speaks to where I think the game is going. So I'll talk about Cyclops, and then I'll talk about the bigger picture. So as far as his PvE potential goes, we basically have these 3 game modes down here. We have World Boss Ultimate / Shadowland, we have ABX and GBR. You can honestly take Shadowland out of there, it doesn't matter too much, but I think Cyclops is somewhere in the middle. Pretty much everywhere. ABX, he's probably towards the end just because he doesn't cap, he doesn't hit 3.5 million, but everybody else on this list does, so he does suffer a little bit there, and perhaps, he'll need an upgrade in the future to actually hit the cap, but maybe they just didn't want him to hit the cap, so on and so forth, winky winky. But as far as World Boss goes, he did a stage 39 Thanos for me with 2 supports, which I thought was fantastic. He cleared it in time. His tier 3 skill does fantastic damage, and it doesn't require all defense down. So he's one of those characters like like Sharon Rogers that doesn't require doesn't rely on all defense down to punch, to get those big punches to land. Same thing with Namor. As far as GBR goes, again, somewhere in the middle, somewhere around Thanos, Mr. Fantastic, those types of characters. But because he doesn't rely on all defense down, he does rank up higher than some of these characters like Captain America, Iron Man. He might be a little bit better than Mr. Fantastic in some cases because he doesn't require the accumulation to take place for the 3rd skill on Mr. Fantastic. Cyclops doesn't need accumulation, or he doesn't have any, so his base damage is just his raw damage. The base is raw. PvP, he obviously sucks. And then for no CTP, and this is the interesting thing, Cyclops is quite high. And I actually think you could even put Cyclops higher because of the fact that, for one, you can very easily give him a very strong obelisk that's unique to him, well, to a few characters, but, fire damage, crit damage, damage proc. That's not the hardest thing in the world to roll, and you're going to be rolling for a lot of fire damage obelisks anyways for all of the other fire damage characters, so chances are you'll eventually land on at least one, not to mention the fact that you're not going to need any other specific stats. You're going to start with fire damage, then whatever you get, whether it's crit rate or crit damage, it's going to work for you. Possibly you could even get double fire damage to work, so there's tons of flexibility. He doesn't have any boosts on his skills, so for example for Sharon Rogers, you don't need crit rate because of her 5th skill, so you actually don't even want crit rate on the obelisk, which starts to narrow down your opportunity and your options for what you actually do end up rolling. So yeah, I think Cyclops is actually fantastic for and he's a fantastic choice as a tier 3 when you don't have any CTP, because he performs very, very well with an obelisk, on top of the fact that he gets that extra 50% fire damage buff from Ghost Panther, which makes him even more valuable if you have Ghost Panther, because you can augment his damage even more without having to rely on a CTP of energy or a CTP of rage. So that is basically where I see Cyclops kind of shaking out. He's not the best tier 3, obviously. He's not even the best or the second best or probably even the third best blast tier 3, but he's right there. He's probably the fourth best blast tier 3. In certain situations, he might be the third best blast tier 3. He definitely has a lot of appealing abilities. You know, he doesn't rely on any sort of gimmicks for his damage, and I think that's an important factor to take into consideration. You don't need to aim his tier 3 skill. It's almost, you know, it almost targets the whole arena. It's an iframe, and it has iframe ignore, so it's almost impossible to get interrupted, and because you don't need to rely on all defense down, you don't have to worry about the rotation, you just have to worry about the timing for the proc if you have an obelisk or a CTP of energy, or if a rage, you just have to trigger the proc and then hit the tier 3 skill, and you also don't have to worry about accumulation before the tier 3 skill. Now, the tier 3 skill, obviously, you know, you can see by the effects, it doesn't have very many effects, it just boosts his own damage and gives him 6 seconds of invincibility. But these boosts, this 90% damage proc, which applies to his tier 3 skill, and the guaranteed crit, those just serve to enhance the damage of the tier 3 skill more without sort of, you know, conflating his DPS. Because if you have skills that last a really long time, for example, Captain America has the accumulated buff, it makes his other skills deal a lot more damage for a short time after his tier 3 skill, but then it'll start to go back down. So you'll have a lot more kind of waves. If you look at the damage in terms of, you know, up and down in terms of max and min, for Captain America, you're gonna have these big waves, these big spikes. I just really like doing this with my hand, to be honest. But for Cyclops, you're going to see a lot more uniformity because, you know, he does pretty shit damage with 1 to 5, but then he has a huge spike up with his tier 3 skill, then consistent damage, then tier 3 skill. So he's just a very consistent tier 3. I would say that overall, he's sort of like your workhorse tier 3. Now the bigger question, the more important question, because, you know, I look at my videos, I look at the content for Marvel Future Fight, I look at what a lot of players are talking about. I don't necessarily participate in every conversation, but I go and I look at what people are talking about on online chat. What are people talking about on Discord? What are people talking about on Twitter? And, you know, a lot of the conversation, I don't want to say all of it, but a lot of the conversation is centered around who do I have at tier 3 and who do I want to get to tier 3. A lot of players are making their next tier 3 as their sort of their goalpost or their motivation. Okay, I'm playing this Marvel Future Fight, I want to get this next tier 3 character. I'm building up my roster to get this first tier 3 character, and so on and so forth. And so it's interesting to consider that with that being the primary motivation for most players, first of all, I have to ask the question, am I right? Do you guys think that that is the primary motivation for players nowadays to get to their next tier 3 or get to their first tier 3? Secondly, if that's true, do you think that that's the right move? Do you think Netmarble has sort of steered the game in the right direction? Should we be aiming for our next tier 3 each and every time? Not necessarily saying that you have to go for one tier 3 every update. That's definitely not the case, and that's what I want to talk about, particularly in comparison to Cyclops, but just the idea that those are your sort of major next goals, whereas a couple of years ago in the game, people's major goals were things like getting Shadowline Stage 30, getting a certain number of tier 2s, getting, you know, doing certain number of tasks in a specific way. But now things have changed, I think, in a pretty big and a pretty meaningful way, and that's why a lot of our conversations are then centered around, I need more CCF, we need more CCF game modes, or more things that drop CCF, or more events to give CCF, and so on and so forth. So it's interesting, and I think Cyclops really brings that to light because he is not, you know, a perennial all-star. He doesn't have anything that makes him stand out above the crowd for either all tier 3s or blast tier 3s. He doesn't bring anything super unique to the table, and he doesn't do anything better than any of the existing tier 3s, save for, you know, some of the weaker ones. He's obviously better than Wolverine, better than Magneto, but he doesn't punch up with the highest of them, so he really inserts himself at his peak, presumably, because we're not going to get a Cyclops uniform for a while, right? At least a year. So he's not going to get any better, and he already inserts himself into the middle of the pack. So what exactly does that mean? Well, for one, it means that Netmarble is not trying to make money, make bank off of, you know, blatant power creep. If they really wanted to sell as many tier 3 packs as possible, if they really just wanted to push, you know, chase the next tier 3, chase the next tier 3, chase the next tier 3, then they would have made Cyclops amazing. They would have made Cyclops better than Jean Grey in terms of damage. Not necessarily in terms of abilities, guard break, immunity penetration, revive, etc., but they would have doubled or tripled his damage. So it was just, there was no doubt in anyone's mind, Cyclops is a boss. Cyclops is DPS king and he's easy to play. That would have been the prevailing theme. All the YouTubers would make videos about it, I would be raving about him, and then people would be so pressured to go into the store and purchase these packs because, like, man, I gotta get Cyclops. He's so good. He's so much better than everyone else. Oh man, a couple months ago I tier 3 Doctor Strange, and now Cyclops is already better. But that's not the case at all, right? I mean, Cyclops is good, and Cyclops does certain things better than Doctor Strange. I mean, I honestly had an easier time. This is gonna sound crazy. I had an easier time killing. I couldn't even kill Stage 39 Thanos with Doctor Strange, but I killed him on my first try with Cyclops, or my third try with Cyclops. I died a couple times from stupid mistakes. So he's easier in certain content, but he's not better than Doctor Strange. No one would ever say that. I wouldn't say that. He's not better for PvE. He's definitely not better for PvP. So then what's the deal? So we're basically, I think we're at the cusp. We're right at the cusp of, we're going to be getting tier 3s from now on that are just Cyclops. We're going to be getting more Cyclops type tier 3s. They're not the best, and they're not the worst. They're just somewhere in between. And then that really starts to make that question, especially if the first question you said yes to is true. Is the game moving towards, or is the game now in a state where people are sort of gauging their progress and gauging their motivation and playing to get their next tier 3? If that's true, then it really comes down to, and I think this is the best part in my opinion, what do you want the character for is going to become the prevailing question for whether you should tier 3 a character or not. And I say this because I get asked a lot, probably at least once a day. I get sent a message somewhere on some platform, hey, who should my first tier 3 be? Hey, I have these tier 3s, who should my next tier 3 be? Hey, I've got these 3 characters at gear 25, level 70. Who should I get to tier 3? I have enough books for all of them. And this question is more and more often being answered by me as another question. And I hate to answer a question with a question. Mama raised me not to do that, but it's true. I don't know. Should you tier 3 Luna Snow or Deadpool or Thanos? Honestly, I don't know. If you want the number 1 PvP character out of that list, you're definitely going to have to go with Thanos. Yeah, absolutely. Do you want someone that's cheaper, that's going to allow you more flexibility for a future tier 3? Maybe you see who's around the corner, but you want someone who can still do like a really badass world boss? Probably Luna Snow. Do you want someone who's good in both game modes, even with like a janky build? Maybe you're free to play, or you just don't like gambling for CTPs because it's like a moral thing. Well, I'd probably go with Deadpool then, because you can put on that all defense down and you can rack up a lot of kills for Proxima and stuff, but you can also take him into PvP. You guys have heard these sorts of lines from me, snippets here and there in different videos. If you watch the live streams on Twitch, you've heard more of this sort of talk and more of this sort of advice that I try to give people live, but it really bears down on me and it really sinks into me every single time. And this is one thing that I relate heavily to Marvel Contest of Champions. Because when I watch people like Seaton, when I watch people like Contest Champion, Brian Grant, and I see them play, when they're asked questions, hey, which champion should I rank up next? In Marvel Contest of Champions, it's different. You don't talk about the character until you have the character. It's weird. And so what players end up asking the YouTubers, and so I relate on that level because I get asked questions as well, so I want to see how they're going to answer questions to their community. They're asked like this. Hey Brian, for example, I have these 5 champions. I've got, Void, I've got Sentry, I've got Vision, I've got Venom, and I've got Venom the Duck. And I want to figure out which one I should take to 565. Basically, which of the characters I should max out next. Again, my words and sort of my example is not perfect. So please, if you're an MCOC veteran, don't pick on me too much. But that question then gets answered by whoever it is that's answering, Brian, Seaton, someone else, Dorkley, it answered with the following statement, hey, what are you going to use the character for? What content are you struggling with? Are you struggling with Variant? Maybe you need an XL champion for Variant 2, you're going to go with Venom. Maybe you need a character like this for that sort of thing. Zap dab doo, bleep bop zap dop. Okay? So you get what I'm saying. Probably if you tuned out when I started saying MCOC, everything sounded like jazz music from Charlie Brown. But the same question is starting to become the answer, or I guess the question answer, in Marvel Future Fight. And that's amazing. I think that's actually really great. Now, do I think that means the game is in sort of a perfect state? Has the game reached homeostasis? Absolutely not. And I want to make a follow-up video to this sometime in the future to talk about that, because I do think that Marvel Future Fight is getting a lot closer to being at homeostasis, but it's really missing just 1 or 2 more ingredients to get that mixture right, and then the Powerpuff Girls can come out of the concoction. But I do think it's going in a very good direction, and I think, I'm really glad to see that new tier 3s are not just blatant power creep one over another. I sort of have to bite my tongue when I say that because Namor got introduced last update, and now he's getting uniform. That really stinks of power creep, but you know what? They definitely could have made Cyclops a lot stronger, and it seems like they purposely held back so that he wasn't going to be the next, big fish to try and catch, especially since he's the third Blast Tier 3 in like 4 updates. Doctor Strange, Jean Grey. It's pretty embarrassing to have so many blasts back to back to back. And so if they were doing that and they were trying to chase people down to get more CCF, trying to force whales and stuff to purchase more Titan component or Titan record selectors to select the books, because you need 30 blast books in 4 months. Who the hell can do that? If you're insanely lucky, you can, but for everyone else, you got to pony up some dollars. So it's really nice to see that they're not doing that, at least for now. Namor, fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. I mean, I want Namor to be strong, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, I leave the question now to you, and I've already bombarded you with a ton of questions, so let me know what you think. Is this the right direction to go for in the game? Have I misread things, or is that the big motivation for people going forward now? Next tier 3. And what do you think? If you were going to speculate, what am I going to say next? What is that little bit of spice? What is that, final game mode, that final piece of the puzzle that Marvel Future Fight is missing to really reach homeostasis? And you know what? It's not necessarily an existing game mode, but it could be an existing game mode if one of the existing game modes was heavily modified. And it might also have to do with Contest of Champions. So let me know what you guys think. I'm very curious, and I await to read your comments down below. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. This video was made with the help of the Netmarble Marvel Future Fight Star Agent program. Thank you to Netmarble for having me. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again later today. Take care.